What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to show you how to build a custom archery stand, but first we got to try it out. As always guys, make sure and like and subscribe, hit that little bell icon. We got some big projects coming up you guys don't want to miss. So I don't have my bow here in Arizona, it's back in California, so the guys here at Desert Archery actually let me shoot one of their own. It's the Bowtech SS34, and I gotta tell you, I think I found a new bow. So it's time to start saving up. All right, so let's go over the features real quick. Obviously, we got the bike hooks for the bows. You can see they kind of go up at an angle, which we weren't too sure about, but it actually turned out really nice. So this part was actually a little bit more complicated, but not really too bad. It's a little flip-up shelf, and then it just stays where it needs to be with a dowel. So one of the reasons I wanted a shelf is because every time you switch arrows or do anything different with your bow, you have to adjust your sights. And I'm tired of holding my bow up here and trying to finagle with it. So we have the magnet strip here to hold some of your tools, and then we have the shelf. You can set it here and you can adjust your sights without having to bend down and do it on the ground. So I think it's pretty handy. And you can see there's a couple of holes right here, kind of look like cup holders, but what they actually are is arrow holders. These are 28-inch arrows. They fit perfectly. You can probably fit 15 arrows in there, no problem. The most important aspect of this entire thing is when I'm shooting in my backyard, I like to have a beverage. Gotta have a place to put it. So we built this for my cousin Chase. His birthday's coming up and he's a crazy little Italian guy that loves hunting, so this is perfect. So this thing was actually pretty simple to build. It took a little while, mainly because we were filming, but it wasn't that hard. First thing you gotta do is you gotta make your cut list. Alright guys, so we got all of our pieces cut. We have a 5-foot 4x4 post, two 20-inch, two 14 and two 9-inch 2x4s, 5.5-inch pickets, and we have 3 pieces cut at 20 inches. First thing we gotta do is we gotta put our little table together, give that time to dry while we get working on the other pieces. I was just going to use a piece of plywood for the shelf, but Dad convinced me to use a picket, and I'm really glad he did. I think it turned out way better and everything matches up. So because I'm making this for my cousin, I'm actually going to carve his last name in here using the 2-inch squares bold font. I'll leave a link in the description below. I've never carved a post before, so this should be pretty interesting. I'm sure some of you guys already saw that the A that's carved in this is actually crooked. Looking back, what I should have done, instead of running my lines vertical up and down the post, I should have run horizontal lines under each and every letter. I don't know why I didn't think about that, but when I do my next one, that's how I'm going to do it. All this carving was done with a profile bit. I did my first pass at 3/16 of an inch deep to get my profile. It was kind of difficult. This redwood carves nice, but there are definitely some grainy spots, especially around knots. So if you're doing something like this, you really want to be careful of that. This is actually the first time I've ever carved horizontally. I didn't really want to do it, but Dad told me that, you know what, you kind of got to get used to it if you're going to be carving odd shaped stuff. And it's really not that big a deal. You're just following a line. Don't let that intimidate you if this is something that you haven't done before. Once I had all my outline done, I dropped the profile bit down to a little bit over 1/4 of an inch deep and took out the rest. Nice and simple. I wanted the magnet strip on here, but Dad had the idea of actually embedding it into the post, which I really liked. We didn't put it all the way in so it was flush, that way it wasn't hard to get your tools off of there when you need them. We used the spiral upcut bit for this, and we went down about a ½ an inch. I know I say it all the time, but I'll put a link in the description below for all the stuff we're using. Alright, so we got the carving done. Dad cut out the notch for the magnet strip. Now, anybody could just put this thing together at this point, but I want this thing to look tough. So we are going to use the new flex grinder, put this thing to the test, and we're going to be using the Kutzall Extreme Medium and put a mean looking edge on every single piece before we put it together. Let's get started. This is actually my first time using this particular grinder, and I have to tell you guys, I love this thing. It worked flawlessly. No issues at all, super powerful, and the shield on it did not get in the way at all. Most of the time with grinders, I take that shield off, but this thing's awesome. I decided to go with the medium Kutzall disc because redwood's pretty soft. I didn't want to go extreme and end up taking out too much. This thing worked perfect. Once I had the edge on all my pieces, then it was time to spray. Man, this was a lot of spraying and even more sanding. If you're doing something like this, make sure you use a primer or a flat finish. Don't use semi-gloss or anything like that, otherwise it's going to bleed and you're not going to be able to sand it out. Thank God for this disc sander. If it wasn't for this thing, I'd probably still be sanding. We used an 80 grit disc for this because redwood's again pretty soft, and I think 60 grit would have been a little bit too aggressive. After we were done getting all that stuff off, we went back with 120 grit on the random orbital to give it a good smooth finish and make sure I didn't miss anything. Alright guys, so we got all of our pieces cut, I got the edge done, they're sanded, they're sprayed, all that stuff. Now we're going to put the base together. I want the post to be removable so it's easy to take wherever you want to go. So what we did is we clamped the pieces together where they need to go, except for these outside ones. We're going to drill the holes and we're going to connect all these pieces and then we're going to connect these. So we're going to get the stand together, then we're going to put the post in and get it going. Dad's real meticulous, so he marked all of his holes first. Now, we're using the new Flex hammer drill and driver set. So this thing has a ton of power. It took us a little bit of getting used to. There was a couple times where we almost sunk the screws halfway through the board, and that would have been bad. Once we got the inside piece done, then we measured the outside pieces where we want them and we clamped them down. This was a pretty important step. I really did not want this to move at all, so just taking a little bit of extra time and putting a clamp on it really is a good idea. Then we clamped the post into place and I used a Forstner bit where I want my holes to go. I'm going to use pins to be able to take this thing apart, so having these holes line up was really important. Now it's time to get the shelf ready to go. So once this thing was dry, we took it out of the clamps and then I used an 80 grit disc on the disc sander to surface everything, front and back. I really wanted this thing to look nice and be uniform. Now if I was smart, what I would have done is put a backer on this thing first and then cut out my notch, but that's not what I did. I marked where I want my notch to go, used a small Forstner bit to drill my holes, and then the jigsaw to cut it out. Once I had my shelf the shape I wanted it, I used a little 1/4 inch piece of plywood and I actually traced it out on there, and then I went and cut that with the table saw. Once I had the piece cut out, then I glued and screwed it on the back. This is just to give it a little bit more stability. One thing you want to make sure of here is, first of all, that you're drilling pilot holes, but that you don't go all the way through the board. That's where marking your drill bit with a piece of blue tape really comes in handy. Once all my pilot holes were done, then I just used little pan head screws to screw it together. Once that was done, then I flipped it over and recut the notch in the plywood. Then I marked where I want the holes to be for the arrows, and I used a 2-inch Forstner bit to drill these holes. Now, you want to take your time doing something like this, which I did not. I'm a little impatient, so I kind of blew out the back of the plywood a little bit, but that's alright, it's just for Chase. Then I used our 45-degree chamfer bit to give a deep chamfer to these holes, and I'm glad I did. I think it looks pretty cool. Once that was done, I clamped it back to the bench and I gave it an edge, sprayed and sanded it just like I did with every other piece that went into this build. Then we used the shelf to measure exactly where we wanted it, and we made some marks. Then we glued and nailed these little cleats to the post for the shelf to have something to rest on. Now the tricky part about this was that we wanted to make sure we had a perfect 90-degree angle, and wouldn't you know it, we nailed it. After we knew that those were exactly where they needed to be, we put the shelf on and made a mark for Dad to use the Forstner bit for our dowel. Now the Forstner bit wouldn't go all the way through, so he finished up the hole with the spade bit. And it did get a little tiny bit crooked, but not enough to matter. Once that was all in, we made sure it was good, then we just attached it with a hinge.
We are on day 2 of this project. This one's taken a little while. We're almost done and we were feeling real good when we ended the day yesterday, and then we realized something. So these little holes in our flip-up table are where the arrows are gonna sit instead of them being in your quiver. The problem is, we put the foam down here, this is too long. Most arrows are only 28, 29 inches. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this piece, we're gonna mount it here, cut this out and put some foam in there. That way, the distance is right and the arrows will be sticking up a few inches.
We cut out the pieces of foam we wanted to embed in these blocks the exact size we wanted it, making sure to leave enough room to attach these to the frame itself. Now, we used the spiral upcut bit to cut this groove out, but honestly, we probably should have gone a little bit deeper so that foam was embedded a little bit farther. Then I taped it off and sprayed these things black. I gave it 2 or 3 coats just to make sure it wasn't going to chip off. Then we attach them to the top of the frame with some 2.5-inch decking screws, and these things aren't going anywhere.
So one thing every good bow stand needs that I don't see a whole lot of is a beer holder.
Look at that. Look at that. What a champ. This right here is what you call an advanced carving technique. Dad really came through on this. I don't think I could have done this. Carving this thing out was a pain. Literally, Dad's knees were killing him by the end of this thing, but he got it done. Then I marked and drilled the holes where the hooks are going to go, and I had a little bit of breakout, but again, this is for Chase, so deal with it. Then Dad put about 8 or 10 coats of Halcyon on this thing, and I really like that stuff. It gives it a good solid finish, and it doesn't change the grain too much. It makes it pop a little bit, but it doesn't darken or yellow anything. Then we use trusty old Starbond in the accelerator to install this magnet strip into the post. And if you guys have not tried Starbond yet, you've got to try it. This stuff would hold a car to a ceiling. Love this stuff. Now I just got to install the hooks, and I'm doing this carefully to make sure I don't cause any splitting or anything. This is where we realized that the hooks had a bit of an angle to them, but again, it worked out perfect.
So there it is, guys. I hope you liked this. I hope the instructions were easy enough to follow in case you want to make one. It really was not that hard. But if you can think of any other features that I missed, that I should have put on here, any creative ideas, leave some comments below, because I'm probably going to end up making another one. So thank you guys for watching. As always, send us an email if you have any questions, Ryan@makeawwoodsign.com, and we'll see you guys on the next one.